doesn't work. So if you want to do that to a developer, at least do the grade filter first, and then ask them to do the human touch, and verify that some of those things that you're looking at are real vulnerabilities and the real concerns they should be worried about. There's actually an interesting case we had with this one, and if some of you didn't see this, or if you've done static analysis and you didn't see this in the past, I would be surprised. But this was a large customer. The main problem, they had too many issues. They have mostly Java web applications, but they're saying, hey, my developers cannot work with this. And what they're doing was put the code through the tool, get the results, send the results, and that was pretty much it. So they start with a few thousand findings. They're going to a few issues, and then we start looking at some vulnerabilities. But the way we've done this is they had an internal policy, actually, that they didn't really know about. And their policy was something relying about the severity of the issues based on the tool they had, and some specific types that they're really, really concerned about. And what we did is we turned that into a tool filter, and then we helped them develop security champions. Security champions are probably one of the things that miss most from all the application security talks. We go to developers and we expect developers to do security. We tell them, hey, you should do some security. Here are some results. Go and deal with them. What I see a lot myself is there's a DevOps engineer who will be told, hey, run this static analysis and then send the results to the developers to deal with them. Now, fortunately, it doesn't work. The tools are meant to help you find a lot of things, but different people care about different things. If we don't focus as security people, if we don't help focus the results down on things that developers should care about a bit, it will be really, really hard to get them to look into this. So if there's one thing that I wanted to take from this is keep in mind that when you run a static analysis tool, you will not immediately get vulnerabilities. A vulnerability, it's only after you confirm something. This is what pen testers do. They'll run a scan, they'll look through the results, and then they'll go down one of those rabbit holes up to the point where they can prove it, they can tell you what happened, and they can tell you how to remediate it. And the tools on the market, they can do different things. You can get tools that kind of give you the findings, and that's it. You can get tools that kind of give you the issues by applying some filters for you or giving you ways of doing the filters. Or there will be some services, I would say, where you get the vulnerability. But depending on which one you go, you'll have kind of different parts of this. I don't think there is any technology out there that gives you everything. But for example, if you go for something that gives you really, 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 really good quality results, then it will be probably good. There won't be a lot of cheap in it because you'll have to employ some skilled people, but you'll get some results. If you want something that's really fast for you and somewhat good, you can get tools with automation that can apply some filters for you. If you want something really cheap, there's tools for that out there as well. So keep in mind that if we want developers, or if you are developers, reach out to security and tell them, hey, look, what's the top 10 things you want us to worry about? And if they say OWASP top 10, say that's not good enough. You need something smaller than that because OWASP top 10 is really, really big, and I don't think anyone will be able to start that from scratch. So this was point number one. So I'll go quickly through the chat to see if there are any questions. Let's see. Good meaning no false positives coverage. So that's a very good question. So false positives can be a problem, and of course they can be a part of that why the results are not good, because the developers will want to focus on remediation and not doing the analysis. But another part of good is getting the right coverage. As we said, the static analysis tools sometimes will not be that smart. They will be a bit context unaware. They'll not know the user code. So if you want to get good results, that'll mean having good coverage of your code, making sure the framework is supported and the unknown APIs have some markup for them so the tool knows how the data goes through the application, and also having, I would say, lower or acceptable levels of false positives. At some point, you'll still have some false positives. Something will look like an absolute vulnerability because you will not have much of a difference between the good and the bad flow. And until you look at it and say, hey, yeah, there is actually a check there that no one else did, it will be hard to tell that. But when we talk about good, I usually say, yeah, have a good coverage for a scan and low numbers of false positives. The second one on my list is that not all applications are born equal. When we do static analysis, I think that a lot of the times we want to do something for everything. And I don't think that's always the case. You need to understand the acceptable risk. And realistically, the more criticality for the application, the more important the application it is, the lower the numbers of those apps are. You'll probably have less than 5% of applications that are really, really important for you. But what happens a lot, and what I see a lot of the times, is people kind of get stuck in this area, and they try to do a lot of the work for this area. And then if you talk to people in the company and you start discussing with the higher ups and with the execs and with the CISOs, you understand, well, there's not a lot of risk that could come from here. And if something were to happen, there actually might be some mitigating things in place. I'm not telling you not to do static analysis for all of your applications, but if you're at the beginning of your journey, you should tell them, hey, let's focus on the critical stuff. Let's not delay this. 5% of the applications that produce our business or that are really important for the business, let's start with those. Make sure that whatever technology you choose, it's right for those applications, for those frameworks, and you're getting the focus you need on those. You cannot really spend time on stuff that's not a lot of money for you. If the impact of one of these applications, only one of them, is higher than the impact of everything else, then start with this one application. And it's probably not a SAST specific thing, but what I see a lot when I talk to different customers is there's going to be a very, I would say, ecstatic team. And I've seen this, and I love it when I see it. There's going to be a group of passionate developers. They want to do their best. And what they're saying is, hey, look, this tool is not right for us. But the problem is that application is not this application here. It's not this really important one. It's something further along the middle. So before you start with static analysis, try to make a list. Before you start with any technology out there, dynamic analysis, interactive analysis, try to make a list of all the applications you care about, and then ask the business to rank them based on impact and how important they are. And look at the top ones first. And make sure that whatever you do those. You don't delay it because you don't have something from the middle piece. And for the love of God, if you have any COBOL down here, just deal with the ones that people really have access to, because these are the ones that could really hurt you. The ones that are available for everyone to access, publicly facing. Start with those. You need to put things into balance a little bit. You might find out that there's that one application that's more important than everything. But there is a solution for things at the other end, the 5 minutes crafts. If the application is really, really bad, just get a WAF, put a WAF in front of it, or you can use other technologies that can protect your application. Make sure you kind of understand what vulnerabilities you have, and you can deploy some mitigating factors. And those don't have to be really expensive or things that cost you a lot. They can be easy tricks to get you in a more secure position. The other thing about the not applications being born equal is the shifting. We hear a lot about shift left. If you haven't been on a static analysis talk about shifting left, you probably haven't, you've been lucky, let's put it that way. You should be able to shift both ways, depending on the application you're dealing with. It's okay for some applications to be scanned right before release. If the only reason you're doing it is because of a compliance, you can very, very happily do it here. Security to release, just do one scan, tick a box, and that's it. I do understand that some people have to do that. That's perfectly fine. For applications where you want developers to be more active and you want to absolutely shift left. Get some people to scan things while they code. Get developers the tools to allow them to do quick checks in the IDs, get the results out, fix as much as they can, check what they've done at build so you can make sure you have a copy of everything and you have kind of a proof for the auditors that you have done your work and you're doing the work. But decide where the application is. You don't have to always go crazy and try to shift everything left. For some of the application, it's much, much easier to do it later on. I've seen a lot of people that enjoy doing it at build time, mainly because it's hands-off for developers. They only get a few issues at the end. And they'll be happy to say, yep, they get a few findings, hopefully. And they'll be able to say, yep, all of these findings, 3 of them we can confirm as vulnerabilities. One of them will be a false positive. So we're perfectly happy to continue from here. And one of the stories we had with this one, it was one that kind of changed how I looked at thinking and putting things in theory before trying them out. But there was a requirement that all code must be scanned. And the logic was, well, if every developer scans their code, all the code is scanned. Makes perfect sense. Works. Let's do it. So we deployed the SAST tool to all developers' IDs. We report the metrics, confirm scan happened, generate the reports. It didn't work. The reason it didn't work is because developers were not interested in it. No one asked for their opinion. And while this was happening, they felt like this was some form of surveillance. They said, this is not acceptable for us. It's something that takes too long, or there's connectivity issues and whatnot. So what they've done is they applied a similar model to this one, where they do some scanning at the build or right after the build. They have a security champion in place to help them with the results. And they're much, much happier with this model. They shifted right from where they wanted, but it was the right thing for the developers, and it was the right thing for the it's an application that doesn't really need that much input. Hey, checking right works as well. You don't have to worry about it. I think it's perfectly fine to do it later on in the cycle and just tick the boxes you need to. So let's see if you have any other questions. So if you want compliance, it should be left to. Why continue build if it will fail compliance checks? So depending on what type of compliance checks you have, that's absolutely a good point. If your compliance says, hey, you cannot release with any of these vulnerabilities, that's perfectly fine. If the compliance only says you have to scan once and then fix a few things, it might be easier for the developers to just add a sprint at the end and doing it then. I've seen a lot of customers that do it, and it's up to them how they would like to do it. But always consult with developers. You'll find out that different teams will have different approaches, and it's perfectly fine. As someone said, sometimes I just like to see the errors scrolling past. It's not necessarily a bad thing to see them scrolling past. They're there. You know about it. It's much better to know about them and action them later on than actually getting developers to be frustrated and pushing back on security. You should definitely work with your developers to get to that happy place, and you can decide when to do it. Just because it's a compliance, it doesn't have to always be compliant. It has to be compliant when it's released, and that's the important thing. If developers are happy to do it at the end, give them another sprint for security or whatnot, and that could work. Again, it's always down to developers. Talk to them. You don't always have to shift left. I understand what the story is. I say the story myself. It's a great story, but at the end, developers are the ones that have to deal with this. And if they cannot deal with this in that fashion, then it doesn't really help them a lot. It's pretty much like regression testing. Something will fail, it's fine. We'll fix it at some point. It's not a bug, it's a feature. The third topic on my list is your code versus the code you use. So when we're talking about static application security testing, we're looking at dangerous patterns in your code. And I probably should have mentioned this in the beginning, but a lot of it's theoretical analysis. If you want to deal with the security of the libraries you're using in your application, that's when you're looking at software composition analysis. And these are the dangerous libraries used by your application. Doesn't necessarily have to be used by your code. You can use a container image that can have some vulnerable libraries in there. But the important thing here is to understand why SAST and why not SAST. Why SAST for your code? And this could be application code, infrastructure code, configuration, and whatnot. You can explain the context. You'll understand it, and it's easier for you to understand where the application is running, what the application is doing, and make the right decision on it. You will know the code, or you'll know developers that have access to the code and can explain it to you. And that's really important when you're dealing with static analysis. Because it's theoretical analysis, if you don't have the code, it's hard to really make sense of what's happening there. Why not static analysis? For third-party code, which will be the app dependencies and containers and stuff, there's just extremely high amounts of code. Realistically, most of the code you're using is going to be third-party code and not intellectual property. And there's no in-depth code knowledge. If you have someone that contributes to those open source libraries or to those third-party libraries, I think that's a great way to contribute. But I'm yet to see someone who has time to spend to kind of go through third-party libraries they use in their applications. You realistically can do third-party SAST and understand some vulnerabilities there, but the effort you'll put into scanning it and to going through the results might not result in what the company expects of you. In terms of the software composition analysis, why you wouldn't necessarily doing on your code, software composition analysis realistically looks at code that exists from out there. I understand there's some tools that can look at code that you kind of copy-pasted from the outside, which is great. But software composition analysis deals on external libraries that have information about those components you're using. And they'll be able to say, hey, this library has some entries about this library that I'm using, and there's a vulnerability. The most famous one out there is the MVD. But the reason you do third-party for the, SCA for the third-party code, it's faster than static analysis. You just look through the list of materials and it'll say that one's broken, that one's broken, that one's broken. You can get information specific to the vulnerabilities in those libraries. So it will tell you, hey, if you use this URL parslib from Python, that's not good. Up to this version, that's vulnerable. You can also get some licensing information. So for those of you that have to deal with legal aspects of it, you can understand if you're using a bad license type. And it gets constantly updated by researchers. There's people that mean well out there that go through these libraries, they test them, they try to make them do wrong things, bad things, they find vulnerabilities, they disclose them in a responsible manner, and we benefit from that a lot. And big kudos and big thank yous to those people, because it genuinely helps us a lot when we have to deal with this type of security. I think third-party code has been the reason for a lot of big vulnerabilities out there. But keep in mind, one of them is static analysis, one of them is software composition. Let's see. Okay, there are no questions for this one. And let me switch back. And story time here is we had a customer that kind of did a lot of scanning of third party, and they're really excited about the stuff they found with the tool. They went out there to share it with the people building the libraries and contributing to the libraries. And what they got back was, we thank you very much for your scan of our code, but here's why all of these things that you report to us are not a problem. And that was pretty much it. If you're going to just run static analysis on our libraries, we'd kind of appreciate it if you try to do some validation before just sending this back to us. Because if you go back to story one, they just had a bunch of findings, no real vulnerabilities in there, and it kind of wasted a bit of the developer's time there, and also kind of got a tiny little slap for sending that their way and not really validating the stuff they sent forward. Number 4 on my list, if some effort up front goes a long way. So I kind of mentioned this in the beginning, that you get findings, and one you need to do is you need to get the vulnerabilities. But there are some things you can do before you kind of start with static analysis, and that's define the things you care about. Understand what the problem is. If you don't know as a developer, always go to the security team and ask them, hey, look, what should we look at? And have a conversation with them. You'll see a lot of the times the security teams might not be familiar with application security. More and more I'm seeing that they have this, but there used to be a case where you'd look at the security team and they would be the typical networking security, firewalls, all the good infrastructure stuff, but not a lot of coders in those teams. Always remove the ones that you doubt about. If you don't really know about it, if you don't really know if it's important to you or not, put it on the side for a moment. Focus on the one you really care about. I know there could be bad things there, but realistically, if you avoid the things that you know are bad, just to look at the things that might be bad, you might be in a world of hurt. So deal with the ones that you know to be dangerous first, and then move to the next ones down. Find your friends. If you're a security team, find your security champions. Look at development teams. Look at developers that are interested in being more active in security. If you manage to create a community of security champions, of people that are interested in security, they will make your job so much easier as a security person. If you're a developer, find someone in security that understands some of this and help them to train you a little bit. I don't think it's fair to expect security to be able to do this job on their own, because they'll not know the code, but they can train you a little bit, help you with some things, understand how things work, and deal with some of the initial questions you might have about why is this a vulnerability, how can this be exploited, and things like that. Absolutely educate and set expectations. I don't think people do this enough, but tell people why they're supposed to do something. Tell them what they're supposed to do. Get rid of cross-site scripting, SQL injection, and OS injections, and then educate them on those topics. Explain why there are problems. Explain how to fix them. What are the remediation timelines? Do you want them to fix them as they're found, or do you want them to fix before release? Going back to the previous question. So expectations are really important. And find out about policies and security frameworks. You might have some of those internally. There's a good chance that someone might have done that before. If not, see what's out there. There's a lot of good practice around. Hey, here's where you should start for a secure development framework. Understand what others are doing. Go to conferences, reach out to people like Michael, like Glenn. They have a lot of knowledge, and they can help you out with some of their knowledge, and they can share some of that with you. And also look at some of the pen testing results, if you had them in the past. They're a great way to get started. If you see that, hey, look, we kind of did really poorly in the past with SQL injections, let's do some tests for that and just start there and go from there. You will not be able to go from red to green day one. And realistically, I don't think there is any secure application out there. There's always something that will be exploited at some point in the future to get through. There's always something hiding that we won't know about. Realistically, probably no one will know about. And, you know, Obama is right. It requires some effort. Static analysis, it's a tool. It's not the entire process, but if you use the tool in the right way, it can make the process a lot easier. And I think definitely do some of these things up front before you even start looking at tooling and anything else. Story time was, this one is quite a good one. So the customer wanted to automate its SAST. The reasoning was simple. Hey, you know, we can integrate with the CI, and we'll just add the SAST step there. It's beautiful. The tool worked, you know, the results were coming out, but the developers complained because what we said before, just too many findings. It was hard for them to discern what was a false positive or not because they didn't have the security training. They didn't have enough time to review. They got a few hundred results. Some cases were thousands or tens of thousands. That makes it nearly impossible for a developer to go through and review. It's just not enough time to review everything. And they had no knowledge on the topics. They were asked to only look at the highs. Well, thank you, but there were so many highs in here, they didn't know where to start. So it's always important to think up front about, hey, how am I going to convince them to do this? And how am I going to tell them that, hey, this is the right thing to do? It's good to have expectation, but again, explain why. That's very valuable for developers because they're very technical people, and explain how to fix them. That could save them a lot of time and a lot of pain. So let's see. It's scary to think that HR design applications. It's, you know what? It's scary to think that marketing designs applications. One of the things we hear about a lot is there's another rogue marketing website being put out, kind of in my little bubble, in my little company. And kind of wonder is like, did we do any testing on that? Because as a security vendor, the last thing you want is something really bad to happen. That will travel around the news quite quickly. So it's always scary to think that people design some applications, they don't really ask anyone to review them, no security, no development, so it's definitely tricky. The other thing that Glenn is absolutely right on is look at how you want to use static analysis, implement it, and then see if you're achieving the results that you're expecting to achieve. And it's not just the findings or the vulnerabilities in terms of results, but is this improving my pen testing results if you're still doing a pen test? By the way, static analysis, dynamic analysis, IAST, software composition analysis, they're not a replacement for pen testers. So once in a while, I get a pen tester, they can try a lot more things than just the technical vulnerabilities. They can do some business logic and business flaws and see if your pen testing results will improve over time. If you see your results improving, or if you see less SQL errors being thrown out from people trying scripts on your web application, then you're probably doing a lot better than you were in the past. And the whole point of static analysis is to make you better. It will not make you secure, but it will definitely make you a lot better than you used to be. And that's the point for pretty much any security tool. And number 5, this is one of my pet peeves. But when should I test a SAST tool on a real application? Always. If you're looking to buy a SAST tool, stats, that's great. That's double checking. That's good. I'll highlight it. Just please don't make a. Oh, give me back my. Where's my pointer? I lost it. No. So always make sure that the tool you're looking for or the tool you're looking at works well on your application, works on your code, works on your frameworks, any of the third-party components you might have. You can tune it to do what you want. Always focus on your applications. If you remember that chart, that beautiful chart we spoke about in the beginning, pick one of the applications from the top, from the ones that you should really care about. And if it's not in the top there, then maybe it's not quite a good candidate. You might have reasons why you cannot try it, but as much as you can, try to do that. It's really important that you do it. That's how you know that the tool is right for you and you'll get the results you should from it. When should you make a decision based on a benchmark or on an application that you know but doesn't really reflect what you're using it to? Never. I've been there. I've seen I've seen what happens, and it's not pretty. We had customers trying this out on benchmarks. They would try the tool on the benchmark. They were like, yeah, that's good. I'm getting the results I expected to. I like it. It's easy to use. It's easy to integrate. I can put in the pipeline. And then they tried on this application with this weird framework we've never seen in our life. And then they're like,
I was recording from another machine.
It doesn't work.
Before.
That's why I recommend using it.
Don't worry, this
on
bit
one of
will
those
be
applications.
edited.
It will make you much happier in the long run. You'll know you've made the right decision.
Every time.
And if you want to do a benchmark test, we'll talk about those in a second. I have a few other little
clicky thing
pointers in there, but always try to use your applications.
Right. So myself and
I know it's a no-brainer. If you want to buy a car, you're not going to buy they do that a lot. Cars are not a good example, but when you want to buy something, you usually try that product. You don't try a different product and then buy it, expecting it to behave like the other one. Always keep that in mind. Test it on your application.
Michael's recording from another machine.
I think Harry has said that
before.
Yeah, so don't worry. This bit will be edited.
So Steve has Steve here in chat has a really good suggestion here, is kind of extract code from your repositories, because you can do that based on the data in the past and see how it kind of correlates with the pen test results to estimate what time you could have saved. And that's an absolutely brilliant idea. If you want a way to validate a SAST tool, that works really well. I'm glad you said that. It's something I agree with 100%. So some other things I get offended by. So whenever someone says the most accurate tool on the market, it probably only finds a few things. It's how most tools start. We start small. We'll start with a niche. Let's say I'm doing Node.js specific from a stack. I don't know, like a mean stack or whatever stacks are very popular nowadays. And I'll be able to find vulnerabilities that are really important from that one, which is great. But over time, we, in all businesses, will try to expand. We'll try to do more. And you're going to go to a customers, and they're going to care more about encryption and the different types of hashing algorithm they use. And then you're going to go to someone, and they're going to care a bit about, hey, what about hard-coded secrets? What about PII? So we'll try to tackle that one. The more we expand, the more findings we get. And that's why tools will get findings instead of getting vulnerabilities. Now, even if they're super accurate, doesn't mean they're actually correct. And they could be missing things. But whenever I hear this most accurate on the market, it usually means it only finds a few things. That's my go-to. Because a lot of the things you find in the issues, they could still be vulnerabilities. It's just not stuff you care about. And there's always a cost. That's number 2. Whichever way you go, if you want to be fast, you're going to have to trade some of the good, which was maybe some of the coverage, maybe some of the false positives will be in there. If you want to be cheap, you're going to potentially trade some of the speed or some of the good. I think there's a there's a website, cheap, fast, easy or something, and that will perfectly explain how many options you can pick up at one point in time. I'll try to find and post it in the chat, but always remember this diagram and see where you fall on it, and that can help you set some good expectations. Benchmarks. I like marketing people. They're creative. I'll give them that. The highest score, it's great. You scan this one application and we're like really good at it. Just because you're the highest in the benchmark doesn't really mean you're doing well in the real world. So that's why I always recommend try it on your applications, see how it behaves, compare with previous pen testing results on a version of the code that's close to it. That's going to give you some really good insight. Benchmarks on popular apps, you're kind of testing the application, IAST top 10 or a damn vulnerable application. Let me tell you something, it's never out of the box. Those applications are well known, they're tuned to those different benchmarks. So what you'll get is, I wouldn't call it a pre-can, but a very fine-tuned scan going on that one application. When you're going to try your application, which looks very similar, you'll find out that potentially you're in a completely different ballpark. You're looking at something that's not even remotely what you expected. The vendors are mean, and we know that, but we do know the tool that we sell, and we can help. There's always help we can provide, but keep in mind, even for us, we have to apply this good, fast, cheap kind of diagram. So it might come sometimes with a cost, or we might ask you, hey, I'll be very happy to help you with this if you can be a reference or stuff like that. But I would say reach out, try and talk to the vendor of the tool that you have. No one really wants to lose business. And I think that's for every single thing. Most people will want to fix it, and they'll want to be there with you and help you through your journey. But just reach out in the beginning. I don't think it's worth spending too much time. If you couldn't figure it out, reach out, see what the options are and how you can progress. We had a few cases where it was a lot easier for our customers to kind of go through the journey if we did it together. CWE count, this is one that I see people using to measure how good a static analysis is. The CWE count doesn't really equal coverage or quality. If you look at vulnerabilities, they can be represented by multiple CWEs. For the same specific issue type, you can have a child CWE, which is very specific to it, and then a parent CWE. So for SQL injection, you can also have a generic injection vulnerability CWE. Just because the CWE stick. Another spelling mistake. I'm doing really well with English in this one. Just because it covers the CWE, it doesn't mean it will have the right rule for your scenario. So always, it's perfectly a smart idea to look at on paper what the tool does, but try it out on your application and see if it finds the thing you expect it to find. Because just because it's saying a second order SQL injection, it doesn't mean it will find the one for your scenario. It doesn't mean it will know your frameworks or be able to deal with those frameworks. It's one of the things that I see keep coming up again, and it's good to keep in the back of your head. JavaScript sucks. I'll give you this. It's a pain for everyone who does static analysis. It's just painful. It's a strange language to deal with for static analysis. We try to do the best we can, but it really does. It's really painful for us. And for whatever reason, developers really like JavaScript. So that kind of puts us at odds with developers, but we're trying our best to make it easier for them, make it faster, and make sure that we can get the things they really care about. But JavaScript really sucks. And avoid technology bias. If I'll be selling static analysis, I'll always tell you, hey, here's how important SAST is. If I'd be selling SCA, I'd be overplaying the importance of SCA and say, you should really do SCA because that's where most of the vulnerabilities come from. Have a look at your applications, understand what you're doing with them, understand how they're built. You might find that static is not a tool for you, dynamic is the tool for you, or interactive application security testing, IAST is the tool for you. Try different technologies. I know there's requirements, you need to scan the code or whatnot, but have a look at different tools. You might find that for your scenario, one of the other technologies will be easy win. I wouldn't call them money in the bank because it's money out of the bank, but it will make it a lot easier for you. So try to always be open to this. We had a case of a customer. They were required to do static analysis by the higher management on their application, and they kept coming back to all the vendors saying you cannot find this SQL injection on our admin page. And we were able to get to it, but it took a lot of tuning. It took a lot of work to get that one into the system. While other technologies, dynamic analysis, was able to find that in the first few minutes of a scan, but they were so stuck on SAST, they would never consider anything. And I don't know what they've done further, but that was a clear example for me that you should consider other things. Another fun story with this one was we had a customer that asked us to do a bake-off. It was us and the competitors. Competition went in the morning. We went in the afternoon. We found something, and they said, absolutely not a vulnerability. In your data flow that you're showing us right there, which is how the data was being presented, there's that middle code for this method that sanitizes the data for cross-site scripting, so we're safe. This is a false positive, so I'm going to mark it down some points. After that, we went and did dynamic analysis, and pretty much the same thing happened as the previous story, where the customer saw a SQL injection popping up, an alert message, and they're like, okay, this is interesting. We gave them the payload. They were able to try the payload on the library, and it turns out that the library was a bit behind. It wasn't sanitizing some specific payloads, and they were using something for cross-site scripting, which was no longer suited for cross-site scripting. They needed to upgrade it. So always keep in mind, look at something else. If the technology doesn't feel right for you, try it out. Don't be afraid to say, hey, I don't think this is right for me. Whether you're a security or developers, I think you should be the ones to educate people that, hey, look, for this scenario, it doesn't look good for us. It's just too difficult. And just as a quick recap, SAST doesn't find vulnerabilities. I wish you could all say it with me, but kind of repeat this. It doesn't find vulnerabilities. It can get you to vulnerabilities, but keep in mind, there's some steps together. Sometimes the steps can be quite painful. If this is the first time you're doing SAST on an application, it will be like answering email after holiday. I don't want to come back to the office on Monday. I've been on a 2-week holiday. This is my second week, but I'll have to go through the stack and see the ones that really matter to me. Not all applications are born equal for a good reason. Make sure you put the focus on the ones that are critical for you. Your code versus the code you use. Definitely focus on your code. Don't try to do SAST on the code you use. The third party, use SCA. It's much stronger for that. Even if you might find something at some point with SAST, I'm pretty sure they run the tools themselves a lot of the times, and pen testers do a lot of testing on those kind of things. Effort up front, always talk to your security teams. Try to find some friends, some internal policies, and try it on your stuff. I cannot repeat this enough. Benchmarks are good. They help us measure against each other's. It's a nice little game between different vendors. There can always be a bias in the different benchmarks to be suitable for one technology more than another one, but just try it on your stuff. If it works well on your stuff, then I think you're good to go and you'll be safe. And if you have any questions, I'll be happy to hear them. I can't promise any answers, but I really hope you have some questions.
Thank you, Florin.
So let's see. All vendors overplay the importance of AppSec tooling, says Glenn. I think everyone overplays the importance of whatever they're doing. I wouldn't say us. I try to overplay the importance of me washing the dishes in front of my wife, saying that's the most important thing. Yeah. I'm definitely overplaying it. We can still eat without it. The washing machine is doing a good enough job. I just like to brag that I do some of the work around the house. SAST is not the silver bullet for security. Absolutely. Matthew is absolutely on the money. I don't think there's any tool that's a silver bullet for security. If it would be that central piece right there that would be good, cheap, and easy. And I don't think we have that yet. I don't know what it will be. Maybe it will be some form of AI enhanced tool. I was reading about the thing GitHub is doing to write the code the other day. Although I hear some concerns about copyright theft, which is involuntary because it just looks at the data and generates stuff. But yeah, it's an interesting one to know what will happen. There's an aspect of weak REST interfaces deep in your microservice stack versus being exposed on the edge. So John raises a good point here is with a lot of the tools, you can find vulnerabilities when they kind of go from the front to the end, and you can kind of see it goes from a user interface to a database. If you have this middle microservice that kind of talks to different systems, that's when it becomes difficult to understand if it's vulnerable or not. Should I do the work? But for that, I would say zero trust. If you can do some data validation on it, do it as much as you can. But yeah, REST interfaces that kind of are really deep, hidden behind, are difficult to do. I didn't want to go into SAST versus DAST and everything, but static analysis tests a component on its own. If you give it a microservice, it will test it. A lot of the times, it will be difficult to see how it connects different microservices. But for example, dynamic analysis, you send the request, however many microservices it goes through. If it finds a vulnerability, it tells you about it. It's up to you to find where it happens. But hey, that's one of the things that I don't need to do for dynamic analysis. We have here a recommendation from Steve again. Shift your dishwashing left. I tried to, but you know what? I prefer to wash my dishes the second day after I eat. I don't think it's a great idea because there's always a big pile to do. But hey, one day I'll just clean every single plate after I finish with the food, put it into the dishwasher, and we'll get going.
You could shift it even further left, actually wipe each part of the plate as you eat off that plate.
I could do that as well. Realistically, I could do that depending how good it is. Is there anybody who's combined IAST path analysis with SAST? I don't know if I'm allowed to do a shameless plug as well. If Michael would let me. We're doing some research, so I will work for AppScan. Sorry, Michael. We're doing some research in that space. We can always discuss what's happening, but there are different ways of doing this. There's a lot of talk about correlation using IAST. For those of you out there, correlation has been the holy grail of application security, where you're basically running static analysis, you're running dynamic analysis, and you want to link the two. And we didn't really have a way of doing that. All of the tools we had in the past were using some logic, some basic, I'll call it machine learning, to learn from patterns to say, hey, if this comes from here, it's probably that call, or that's where that page happens. But it wasn't a clear path between the two. So with IAST now, we have this opportunity to start doing exactly that and do some linkage between IAST and static analysis to see how the source code matches an HTTP request, because IAST gives you both. It gives you the call stack and also gives you the HTTP request, and also link it to dynamic analysis on the other side. So in the future, with more IAST players in the market, with more AppSec vendors kind of having all of these capabilities, we hope to see more of that in the market and understand a bit more about, hey, how real is this? And hopefully that will help you with the thing we're talking about, where you have to prioritize things. And hopefully, the holy grail of application security is to just get the vulnerabilities. Where was that lovely slide? Is to get the little green bead out right here. Potentially correlation might do that for us. I think it's still early to say, but people are looking into it. If you find with SAST, DAST, and IAST, it's probably a higher chance it's real. I owe you a beer. I don't think I do, but hey, happy to buy you one. As long as you can get a permission to get out of the house and negotiate with wife, I'm all good.
Super. So what's the coming plan with giving away the books, Florin?
I was planning to do the most questions asked, but Steve has been too active for this, and we already did him a plug for his show, which, by the way, he said he'll do a live demo for GitHub Copilot. So
he did that last week. So that's recorded and published, so you can check that out on Twitch and YouTube.
So check Steve's stuff out. Now he owes me a beer. I don't know. Do we want to do some maths, or shall we do something else and just pick one of the interesting questions from here? I'm biased again because Steve again made a really good suggestion about pen testing. I just really don't want to give you that book, man. How many copies do we have?
2. We've got 2 copies.
We've got 2 copies. Okay. Well,
does he have a copy of the book? Maybe he doesn't want it.
Oh, maybe he has a copy of the book. True. Favorite CV, is that my CV value? Is my CV? There's a thing with CVs and CWEs, right? So the person who can tell me the difference between a CVE and a CWE gets the book. So what I'll do is I'll quickly go to this, and don't start typing. Well, you can start typing, but
Oh,
we'll do it like this. Hopefully, you can still see my screen.
no.
Cool. Well, we'll get there in a second.
We're getting answers.
Oh, okay. I like that. Let me share this again, just so I have it shared here. So let's see what we have. Weakness versus vulnerability. So John gets the first one. Weakness is generic, while specific vulnerability. So we like that.
Are you saying Robert's got one?
So I think John has the first one that I like, because he kind of explained that the weakness is generic versus the CV being very, very specific.
There's a very long answer now.
Hey, we got a long one. So let's see what we got. Category versus specific instance, no vulnerability. We're still looking. Maybe we find one that we really like that really explains it. CV no vulnerability versus CWE finding type. Category versus vulnerability. Okay, sorry, Matthew, that's a bit too generic. Steve didn't even play. Oh, we have a long one from Patrick. Let's see. Not the instance within the product.
Robert's desperate.
Oh, so I like the one from Patrick. So I think Patrick is going one up.
So that's 2 winners, right?
So I think we have 2 winners. I'm sorry, Rob. I'll say that Patrick actually gave a really nice one. So basically, he said something really well. The CWE doesn't have anything to do with an instance of a product, while CVE has to do with a specific instance within the product or system. So I think our 2 winners are John for doing a really quick but very nice one, generic versus specific, and Patrick gets the second copy for actually explaining it quite nicely that the CWE doesn't have to do anything with a specific system, while the CVE is very specific to a system. But I'm sure that Michael will be here in the future with other giveaways.
You've upset one of my attendees now. It's all your fault, Florin.
Was that Steve? I don't think Steve.
Robert. You've upset Robert. Okay, so if John and I've forgotten the name now. Patrick. Yes, if you guys reach out to me privately so that I can have your address and I can forward the books over to you guys. Super. Okay. Well,
I think we'll be around. Join the bubbles, ask questions.
Yes, let's join the bubble, and I'll tell you. OBS actually crashed, so I lost some of the recording.
Good.
But we can cover. I mean, a bit that we go through the 5 points again in the podcast, so I don't think anyone will miss anything. But
I think it was just like the first 5 minutes or so before he got to the first one. But yeah, all good. Right, let's get off stage and hang out downstairs. Thank you, everybody.
Yeah, thank you, and see you next month when we have Izar and Matt talking about threat modeling. Definitely worth coming along to that one. And again, there'll be some great giveaways in that one. So, so those of you leaving right now, do come back again next month. The rest of you, we'll chat to you for the next half hour or so. Thank you.
Super.